courts, free media, independent media and universities, free choice. You cut down one of the legs and we have the table turned or collapsed. If it is not collapsing, so for the beginning, anything that is on the table lands on the floor, produces great mess. 8 years are the years of consecutive warning signs, red flags, which said, wake up, something bad is happening. We are looking for many solutions. We, in the sense of NGOs, citizens, we are looking, and we find some of these. In the incubator, there was no agreement with regards to all the solutions proposed, but it brought together a group of outstanding people. Not always these people stand on the same side, but these people are connected by the values and the care for the good of Poland. We have a reversed situation. We don't have Professor Ackerman. Care for well-being of Poland. How do you understand it? This is my first question. It's the first time I answer your question. I like being here, and I hope Professor Ackerman will be joining us. These are basic needs that we are guided by, and I think these are joint needs of all the people, vast majority of people. On the one hand, the necessity to create equal field for everybody to play on. It's very difficult, but the fact that it is difficult does not mean that we should give up on that, having the knowledge we have. We, Poles, know how to create equal field, play field. We know it's starting since 1978, and we know where mistakes are. We've got good and bad examples to relate to. One of the starting points are emotions, or the values, as you said. Sorry for being not so elegant. By putting this agenda into the Constitution, what is a miracle of the group of 130 activists, intellectuals and scientists of different views, for 6 years we were able to escape this temptation. Once it appears, it was great. When it appeared in discussions, the other party said, well, we are realizing your personal wish list rather than speaking about natural rules of the game, where every party is a winner. I'm going to share my personal reflection to finish off this intervention. It was very interesting to collaborate with my friends. Friends is the word that is justified. Also these very conservative. You might hear that after 6 years we started noticing how right the other party might be. We are progressive, we are conservative, and we believe that in normal policy our friends might be wrong, but we were able to discuss. We didn't want to find cold and mean. We didn't want to convince one another. We didn't want to get rid of the content. We focused on what Helena said, rules of the game, we kind of show that you can talk differently to one another without enlightenment of the other party, without conversion of the other party, but how to coexist in one state. It comes as no secret that I can see the researchers, and I can see them smiling, nodding their heads. I had the pleasure to be a part of the promotional campaign of the book. I met very intelligent people. Not always did they have many touch points, but the main touch point was the care for Poland and democracy. Something that has been reverberated in many debates of the freedom games. Care for creative and open and critical thinking. It's like this, Helena. It's the prerequisite of us listening to one another to get understanding of the other party, so that these projects have practical realizations. I hope this is just the beginning of a practical project. We've done the job at specific area. As Maciej said, we are intellectuals, activists, entrepreneurs. Politics is also usually done by politicians. So it's key for people who are into politics to start implementing this. And we've been dealing with convincing people for quite a long time. We cannot say that the situation is hopeless. Returning to your question, a moment ago I was attending a very interesting panel. Professor Sylwia was there. We present different opinions, but we like one another very much. Two things. They were discussing entrepreneurship of girls and how to develop this entrepreneurship. It's differently created compared to what crossed my mind, because this is ability of being brave to implement your ideas, but not on your own. I try to avoid the word leadership because I don't like the word leadership, because I dislike it, but it's not about leadership. It's a tool to do things that are important for communities. This is the common point of the previous panel, the one that we are attending, what we want to attain. We discussed with many people, local politicians, they see that, they do that. Common good activity. I know it's a classical category, but we should be returning to this. This care is the care about us, and broadly defined us in a democratic world, to live a better life. There are different ways to reach this. The support of girls' entrepreneurship, young people of particular sex. This is one of the forms. What we suggest here is this focus on unity of thinking and acting in the spirit of democracy, delivering it with democratic tools, which is equally important. At the end of the day, you might have different opinions on what common good is, and in the incubator we might have different views. regarding details, but we may agree, and this is presented in the book that we wrote together, you can create real principles where we can implement all various ideas for common good that enhances the state. And the state is the ultimate institution that observes and safeguards democracy. You can do it. It's not like all of us being on the right wing, left wing, or in this polarizing clinch we've been in for 8 years. Wise decentralization supports leadership, entrepreneurship. It might be civic entrepreneurship, and you give people a vent because the system supports it. The system supports it so that the people can act together for the benefit of common good, and they have a chance to think about it because they've got the tools to implement it.
We've heard the word decentralization. We'll get back to it because, as you will know, this is a keyword for the book. But let me stay with this common good. Maciej, the common good in Poland is a problem, just like as I could see today and thought about how many values are problematic for us. I almost used the word security. It's a word that somebody is trying to steal from us or by certain political narrative. Please tell me, how about the common good? How to look for the keys that would let us keep the common good as truly common rather than torn apart by political formation to pieces. The first step is to acknowledge it has to be common, so it mustn't be imposed by the majority in the parliament, often in the mood of delegitimization of those who have a different view on the common good, but it has to appear in the situations where our free choices as citizens come together somewhere. And we are presenting an optimistic vision where there are many areas where Poles can agree. Security, pro-European direction, pro-Western politics. We may differ in some details, in that we should be a state with a strong, efficient army or military, a strong national security system, cybersecurity, a state that responds to the need of energy transition, is secure in terms of energy. These are examples of the areas where, if these are not destroyed by polarization, if they are not a tool in this Polish war, there is a remarkable chance we can agree on those. But the current system doesn't support agreement. It is centralized on the level of political decision, but not implementing public tasks. We are pretty well decentralized here, but on the decision-making level, in terms of political decisions, it is highly centralized. And we may think, okay, then we will have this common good. No, we will have common good defined in the logic of winners, losers. If we have a system that local governments, especially those of regions and cities, can have the third way between full victory, full defeat, there is this way that some things can be transferred closer to citizens in the subsidiary spirit. We can have the choice that not everything has to be the same throughout the country, and what we choose, what our political representatives choose to remain common would be the common good, the chosen harmony rather than imposed one. So the system paradoxically, although decentralizes the states, as Helena says, strengthens it, because whatever remains in the center is what people and their democratically elected representatives want to stay in the center. And if we are fatalist about Poland, if we believe nothing links us, our idea may be dangerous, because if we allow people to decide what is supposed to be the common good and what is supposed to be the common good on the lower level, what if there is nothing? We disagree with such a diagnosis. It's false, harmful for Poles of any political view, and it's more likely as a potential dystopic future if we keep fighting the progressive, liberal, and conservative, because the act of conquering will result in less links. But if we have this opportunity to relieve the pressure in the parliament, we may see that the 16 regions and some cities will be shockingly alike, even though using different language, different narrative, different story. But we are not that much different if we remove the aspect of violence that defines everything today. We can only hear violence and visions of violence, because if you look at the electorate, and those who opt for peace, is fear. The fear of the Progressive Party that we would come and do what they did to us. How long is it going to last? Pray as short as possible. But as we are here, Helena, Maciej went into details of decentralization easily. I would like you to tell us, and especially to our listeners and viewers online, what it's like with decentralization. An accelerated course in decentralization in the form of the social pact. When decentralization is implemented, everything remains the same. But afterwards, they too, in the full version of the model we recommend, implementing the whole system would require some constitutional changes which would delegate more tasks to be carried out by regions and local governments, but also direct taxes, pit and sit, transferred to local governments directly. They wouldn't need to go to the state level, then to be returned back to local governments in reduced value. The regional charter that makes the grounds legal regulations when implementing our decentralization idea will allow regions and local governments to introduce significant changes against the existing law. These may be things on education, how the schools are supposed to be supervised, universities. These may be issues regarding culture, science, health. There is lots of space to act, but it doesn't have to be used. If somebody wishes, go ahead. There are some rules we describe in the book, how to make it to avoid chaos and dumping, and In our model, we form regional senates were occupied by local government authorities, and there they would vote with weighted votes that reflect the population the authorities are responsible for. A region would be headed by the governor, but it wouldn't be a governor as we have it today. It would be the very top of local government. It wouldn't be a representative of the government in the area. The current governor institution would be cancelled. So we would have this local governance governor, and they would be members of the new Polish Senate, which, contrary to its current version with 100 people elected in common elections, would be people leading regions, and in the Senate they would vote in the very same way, weighted votes per number of inhabitants in the region. That would be the basis how the system works. That would result that in every stage, local and central governance, people on the very top would have direct contact and direct interest to represent their own communities, and at the same time they need to be able to find agreements with other people representing other communities, otherwise they wouldn't be able to pass any single resolution. So we use mechanisms that are efficient in the European Union. We take what is there and exists and works, and we expand it. We also give the field for horizontal acting between different local governments, and there are it is possible to have special cooperation between different local governments. They would develop multi-annual cooperation plans to think long-term strategically and then dispose of the money and even design certain development strategies. It may be combining research with entrepreneurship. That would be a decent R&D solution. I'm just listing some of those items. One of those elements to make it civic and not just change a mechanism of enforcing power would be that citizens, inhabitants of regions would have more efficiency given by definition. In a referendum, they would be able to dismiss local authorities. They can far more easily present their own initiatives. On the other hand, local authorities would be subject to assessment, and the assessment would be binding. If they go down by a significant number of positions in the national rankings, the authorities cannot be re-elected. So there are many things that combine items together, but there are many elements down to earth where people know best what is good, what works, what doesn't, and there is this key stress to that citizens who know best what's happening in the environment, that they have higher causality, and people who have their own interests kindergartens, lighting, energy. And that doesn't have to scale onto the country, it is scaled locally. At the same time, and this very model is something scales well locally, it facilitates implementation of the same thing by other local governments through cooperation. And then the very pragmatic aspect. If very bad policy is introduced somewhere, it will only be in one place, not countrywide. And that's for the case if everything goes bad. So if there is this bad experiment, its effects will weaken because citizens will have efficiency of acting. When I look at different research, I speak to people, to my students. Efficiency is the key that every generation refers to. Not just restoring values, recovery of dignity, not just breaking the monopoly of truth, but agency, which for people is so critical, and agency is hope for the future of democracy for many. And we have to admit that was well read by Jarosław Kaczyński when he spoke about impossibility which restricts agency. Whatever you may say about the law and justice governance, things they want to do, which are mostly find wrong, though it's not my most significant accusation, I rather hate their authoritarian practices, but I don't like their policy either. But we need to admit that they do run the policies. The question comes, can we create a system where this agency is more present? The first step would be to admit that we have to forget this myth. We are all alike. And if somewhere on the left wing of Polish Catholics we had this Unia Demokratyczna Party, Democratic Union Party, if we find a point without politics, always the same, stable, and people would go for it, but it's not like that. The recent decades have proven that Poles do not want it, and we recommend another solutions with lots of politics. And our the next panel on regions of dreams, well, we hear criticism that these are conservative. Well, we speak about progressive and conservative regions. That shows a lot about assumptions of our elites, what the politics should look like, rather than our book. That shows we do not feel comfortable with the fact that we can be seriously different on essential matters in terms of ideology. In my previous speech, I wanted to persuade you that the regions would be very much alike. I am a part of this thinking that you should present it this way, so that we more or less would be alike. Do not bother. But the point is, this is what makes people support authoritarian populist parties. It seems that they are all centrists, and that election means nothing because the same elite shall continue the same policies. You do not need authoritarian regime to have it like that. You may have democracy, independent institution, and serious political disputes. We want them to happen in regions, in cities, between them, so that we can compete in ideas between regions, but we need to give people opportunities to experiment, to create clear policies, explicit policies. As we know of political geography, Poland is divided also by geographical distribution. It's not the only reason. East part of Poland is more conservative, while the west is more progressive. Let's use it as a tool to bring back life to democracy and replace this rotten compromise with healthy, sound competition.
I like this life of democracy. Life is what Maciej was speaking about. In this state, you can lose elections, but it's not a loss. Somebody loses the power, but they do not lose agency. It is important because in the back of the head, we need to have this, that the power should be required things. And it is easier to require because the distance is shorter between the citizen and the authorities. Everything is closer to people. The system does not lose, even if a specific party loses elections, because citizens do not lose democracy in their state. They don't lose the state. As Maciej said, we can see what is the fear against losing the state being the mechanism of exercising power. What we propose is broader than exercising power. Being the leader of the state means exercising power, but not only. This is also taking responsibility. So other elements should also be vocalized. Not only is this the possibility of imposing your will Weberian way, but first and foremost taking responsibility for community. Speaking about the question that you mentioned, how to put it in words properly. Politicians get out of the simple framework that the political career is going to Wiejska Street, whether it's the culmination of political career or presidential palace. This is quite a clear path. Yeah, political career may have different images. Yes, that's the one of the things. And in the model that we propose, there are very important roles related to agency with exercising power. I'd like to use the word exercising responsibility at the local level, which means that central functions are key but narrowed down. If a party loses the authority at the central level, it does not mean that they lose everything, because most probably there are voivodeships, provinces or smaller communes where the representatives of a party that loses power still wield the power on the local level because they do it well. They are elected by inhabitants. It is no longer 1-0 system. When you think about political career, it's much more interesting. There are many more places that are attractive. To think about policy as a career, as a profession, as your vocation. So when we have more possibilities, losing power in the center is not the end of the world. also from the point of view of citizens, because fewer things are happening in the center from the point of view of citizens, which is key, because education, social care and other things happen at the local level. Strategic functions are not marked with ongoing policy that we are facing at the moment, because the mechanism creates different logics of exercising power. And when we look at what we have discussed with politicians of different options, we've seen the interest in our idea that is disconnected from party lines, but it's more appealing to those at the lower level of the ladder of political, the lower level of the political ladder, if they are in local governments in centers. As you might guess, the higher, the less interest. So potentially they lose power that they have. But those who are down there, who do concrete things, schools, rubbish, are the people who can see that this idea of this new contract gives them greater room for practical activity. If they do it well, they can stick to this role. Before we give floor to our public, I'm looking at the clock. The Freedom Games shows the turning point in its title. So what is the turning point, Maciej? So that we can implement some solutions, make them live. We are going to have elections that are very important, that are key, that will be the turning point. You have reverberated is that the key elections are in 4 years' time, because we know then what happens if we reverse the actual trend in polls. We have to, in 4 years' time, we'll have to keep the power and think about it critically. And we'll have to learn how to think about co-citizens, remembering, this is what I highlighted, it's natural that people are different. We don't have to believe them to be our enemy in an automated way. I am flabbergasted with unrealistic plans of restoring rule of law on the table, connected with the charges that our project is unrealistic. Let's believe that opposition wins elections. All projects that we have, and they are associated with simple return to the state from before 2015, are the acts, the bills. But for a bill to become an act, we need the president's signature. Little chance that the opposition has got 60% to discuss the veto. But even if, it can be sent to the freezer operated by Ms. Przyłębska, and it does not become an act. All ideas that stand no chance of president's signature are examples of lack of realism, even if the opposition wins. So it's, in our opinion, it's more sensible, and it can be concurrent, to discuss with President on specific acts, but it's not a detriment to sit and talk as described by Professor Balicki and other co-authors, and previous Judge Gwizdak. this atmosphere and the bills will not be impeded, even those presented at the Freedom Games, to work for the benefit of the new round table. Representatives of the right wing will be thinking whether we are able to create constitutional rules that can be accepted in 2027, because the right wing may regain the power. We cannot believe that the opposition wins, they will never lose. It's absurdity. So it comes as a paradox. Self-government as the pillar of constitutional rules, which are peace, progressive. There's People's Party on the Green Party, very important role, might be the most real way out of the of this impasse, rather than thinking that President Duda's attitude will change, because started in 2015, and he'll be willing to sign acts that will dismantle the system he has created himself together with the ruling party. It's the greatest example of wishful thinking, so our proposal is pretty realistic in this context. Wishful thinking, yeah, we would like you to give up on that. But now, your wishes, your questions. We've got 9 minutes to go. Attorney of Laws. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to, otherwise I will die. I was sitting like on a hot chair. I can see wonderful authors of this book amongst the speakers and in the room, and the creators of the incubator. There are also other authors, and I want to say that I pay respect. Why? Because the concept that we are presenting here by Maciej and Helena, I don't know whether you have a similar feeling to mine. You create a living democracy in Poland, organic democracy. So we give up on cold democracy based on procedures that citizens are only required to put their vote into the ballot 1 in 4 years. You want to create a civic and self-responsible society. This is the motivation that drives citizens to keep their eyes peeled in local governments. This is organic democracy that is wonderful and fantastic. That, you agree with me, is based on NGOs, but NGOs have not been created for that. They are here to motivate rather than take over the responsibility for the state and management. Referring to what Maciej said in his latest intervention, there are differences, we know that, but we differ beautifully. I don't know whether we can create such a round table for a simple reason. The experience of the last 4 years shows that you do not negotiate with terrorists, but we can think how to include this part of political class that is anti-democratic, who are authoritarian by nature. Let's try to convince them to think differently. We can do it. Let's hope. It was a short comment. I grabbed the microphone to tell you respect. Thank you very much for your work. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have questions. Good afternoon, good evening. I was listening about your initiative in a podcast. I don't remember who was airing out opinions, There were many interesting examples how provinces could operate, but what you, doctor, said grasped my attention. Political class. Why should I agree to that? I don't see any possibility. Nobody who's in the same has the interest in giving up their powers. There is the interest of local leaders who sometimes work hard to the guts to create something and they are deprived of finances. PAS removes even more finances and centralizes the power. How long will it take to convince the political class, or should there be any disaster before anybody sees you should correct something? Let me start with the second question. I hope there'll be gigantic ego of the Polish political leaders. We are facing a moment. The biggest leaders of the parties are also at the stage of their life, that they want to go down in history. It gives them the chance to mark their place in history. Who remembers the Prime Minister 20 years after? Nobody's going to remember it. Period, and so on and so forth. The end of Polish War, creation of this constitutional consent, and I'm speaking on my own, not on behalf of the group. It was somewhere lost in 1907. It was progressive side constitution. As you remember, the right wing was underrepresented. Owing to 1993 election results. So correcting it by creating a true national consensus. These two tribes that have coexisted for centuries in Poland's history, it's rooted in our culture, progressive and conservative side. If you can do it, it will be remembered for 200 years. The authors will be remembered. The history books will write about them. That's the only hope. This is something to grasp, to go down in history, to be in the glory of fame pantheon. Fathers and mothers, the founders of the Republic of Poland pantheon will include this. This is the startup point. We are saying turning point. We are not saying it should be done one-to-one. May they have a round-table discussion. May this finish something different, but successful. It's not about every institution to be implemented. The idea, the rules of the game are joint and common. We need to agree. May this resonate among the leaders of the political class of our country. Let me add to that the pragmatic version. I'm a specialist in pragmatics today. Let's have an optimistic assumption. Opposition wins the next election. There's a great chance that they will lose the next one because there'll be a huge scale of changes. It's too big to see the positive results before the end of the first terms of office. Pragmatic would be to dispel the distributed powers. If they lose the power in the center, they keep more power at the local level compared to what we have today. Because local governments are burdened with a great number of tasks to do with limited money, less and less money kind of. So, ego, the will to go down in history, and political pragmatical attitude would result in them believing that it makes sense. We can join this pragmatic and history-related ones. Dear opposition of today, if you win election, It will be your first intuition to swing this pendulum towards liberal and progressive way. This will be the first thing you try. The tough recovery of the state from this conservative. If you lose your teeth of the first months of the first year, we are here. Our book is here. It has been printed. You know where to find it. You know where to find us. You need to be careful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It goes to Maciej, Helena. I'm very sorry that we've been unable to get connected on the internet and we didn't have a chance to talk to Professor Ackerman. We'll try to recover it in the time to come. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you'll be staying with us in front of your computers and here in the room, so that in 15 minutes time you will listen to a second debate on provinces of our dreams. Thank you very much, hope to see you and hear you soon.
Jestem z zawodu lekarzem, zajmowała się diagnostyką chorób nowotworowych.
W Białorusi zajmowałam się mikrobiologią i molekularną biologią.
Byłem nauczycielem szkoły podstawowej.
Naszym celem jest budowanie umiejętności, które są ważne na polskim rynku pracy.
Szybko nabierają takiej pewności siebie, bardzo szybko się uczą.
Wszystko możliwe, kiedy starasz się.
Każdy wybór ma swoje konsekwencje.
Dziś na kazaniu o takich jak ty mówili, że to morderczynie.
A wiesz, że ta, która ci pomogła, trafi za kraty?
Trzeba mieć sumienie.
Jak mogłaś to zrobić własnej matce?
Aborcja to najgorsza zbrodnia.
Gdybym ja podjęła taką decyzję, nie byłoby cię tutaj.
Organy państwa nie będą przyglądać się temu obojętnie.
Życie i zdrowie kobiety jest najważniejsze.
Stop kryminalizacji aborcji.
Kobieta decyduje.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Pan Zbigniew Hołdys.
Zgadza się. Dla znajomych Zbyszek.
Serio? Zbyszek. Nadchodzące wybory są zbyt ważne, żeby zostawić je bez kontroli. Dołącz do obywatelskiej kontroli wyborów. Zróbmy wybory bez picu.